Hi, this is Null Inquisitor, and today I'm going to run a short combat in Gurps to show off um, the, the process or the flow of a combat in Gurps. Well, first things first, Gurps being a toolkit, you have to know that you can apply every combat rules in the book, but then you probably need a spreadsheet if you really want to pass through all the little rules and little nooks and crannies. So my first advice to you, if you want to run a combat in GURPS, you should definitely read the basic combat chapter in the GURPS basic set number 2 campaigns, starting at chapter 11 or page 362. And you should mainly concern yourself with, of course, knowing the rules about the success rolls. Maybe study a little bit about the maneuvers, just to get the sense of what characters can do in one turn, and then build on that. Just run a small, quick combat example for yourself, maybe with a friend, and start from there, just by doing some one-on-one combat, maybe. So this video will try to help you with the flow of a typical GURPS combat. So and when you're more comfortable with the rules, I would recommend that you start to pick and choose what you need for your campaigns. It's very important to be knowledgeable and maybe not let the system crawl into your ideas of a combat. You could very well, for example, if you're a new BGM and you start to run a combat and you have some old fart like me who are experienced with GURPS, you could let yourself trying to include every rules in the book, maybe because the experienced player want to do a called shot using it locations, and maybe you haven't read this passage in the book, so it would be probably better if you're starting to just ask your veteran player to play along and not use hit locations if you don't know about it. So don't feel obligated to use every rules you don't even know about. Just use what you know, and if you have read the whole book, well, maybe pick and choose what you need for the flavor of your game. Maybe for, I don't know, a swashbuckler adventure type of game, maybe hit location isn't super fun. If everybody is trying to aim for the head, or so let's keep that in mind. So pick and choose. It's still a toolkit, even if you're doing combat in this game. So let's proceed with the combat sequence. Of course, if you're I tried here to make it simple with the step-by-step you can see over there, right here. So these are just a couple of notes, and of course in the book you can get lost in details and description, because everything in the book is really well defined and explained. So for your first read through, I would recommend to just keep in mind the general idea of what you're reading. Take some notes, and everything should be fine. So sequence of action, Well, step one, before the game is happening, you should have maybe took notes of every character's basic speed stats. This will allow you to know who's the fastest among every character, and you can, even before the game, you can know who should be faster and who does begin combat if combat were to happen in a particular scene. So there is this sheet you can download from the Steve Jackson Games site called the Gurps GM control sheet. It's pretty useful, but you can make one yourself with just scrap papers and just by noting everyone basic speed. And basic speed is a stat where you keep the decimal after the point. So you can have characters with a 5.5 or a 5.25, and these are important to determine who goes first. So a couple of things to know about basic speed and sequence of action. I already talked about in another video in the Gurps series. Just quickly, you can have advantages that can play on this, like the combat reflexes, which give +1 to your basic speed just for the sake of figuring out the sequence of action. So some characters can have advantages messing around or modifying this basic speed. And then for ties, if you have two characters with 5.00 of speed, you can use whatever you feel comfortable doing to split characters apart, like comparing dexterity, perception, IQ. You can choose what you feel is more sensible to you to just determine who's going to hack before the other. So once you have that, once you filled your character sheet, your GM control sheet, you have then you just have to set the scene, and as you do in every RPG, you set the scene. If you play with a map, you can lay down a map, some minis and such. Otherwise, just describe or do a sketch of the environment and the relative character's position, maybe, or just describe the thing. And yeah, once you go there, you can already, without asking anybody to roll initiative, you just start the combat by taking your sequence of action you took earlier and just go with the first one, the fastest character. So in my combat over here, I have Sir Manfred of Nakarat, a knight badass extraordinaire, against Chepe the Rascal, a mustache-twirling, extremely niche martial artist who will, those guys have both identical stats. So just for the sake of this combat. So in this case, my two characters here have exactly the same basic speed of 5, basic 5. As you can see, they both have pretty ordinary stats, 10 being an average. So for the sake of this combat, I will roll a dice for each character to just split them apart. So Mr. Manfred will have a 3, so I'll take a note here, and Chepe will have a 5. So Chepe will go first. So step 2, Chepe, engaging combat. The mighty knight against the roguish, mustache-twirling martial artist will duke it out on a beach near the ocean, so on a clear sunny day. Chepe will act first, and he will choose maneuver. Maneuvers and Gurps are the moves or the action you can do in combat. Compared to the typical D&D action, since the combat in Gurps are in 1 second turn, things you can do are fairly short and fairly quick. So for example, if your character decide to do the typical movement and attack, let's say I want to advance towards an enemy and strike him, well, in Gurps I have to slow time down to 1 second. So what is the distance you can make in this system and still attack your opponent with some kind of competence? Well, this is called a step, and a step is just 1 yard. It's 1 yard for most characters. When you have superheroes and robot, the steps can be several yards of distance, but your character would have to possess an enormous amount of speed, like in the range of 20 or 15 or even higher than that. Then your steps will be calculated differently. But for most of characters will have a step of 1 yard. So when you want to do the typical move and attack a la Pathfinder or D&D, you will want to do the step and attack, and this is just 1 step and a strike. Now, if the target is really farther than that, you will need to move, and move let you move on the map or in space, whatever, to an amount of your move score. For example, Chepe have a score of 5, so that means 5 X's or 5 yards away. If I still want to run that distance and still strike or swing my sword at some opponent, well, I can do that. There is a maneuver called move and attack. Might as well add it to my document. Move and attack. This allows me to run like a madman. Remind yourself, this is a 1 second turn based combat. So if I'm running like 5 yards in 1 second, I'm not just moving like in the movies. I am dashing. I'm like charging this opponent. So in the books, they will say, okay, you want to be less cautious about your attack. So the move and attack will give you a substantial penalty to your attack, like a flat -4 to your skill. And if your skill is then above a 9, it is reduced to a 9. It can never exceed like a 9 because it's such an extreme action. Think about it. You run like a madman and you're trying to swing a sword precisely at an opponent. Yeah, it's nearly pure luck instead of, and you can have very high level of skills, and yeah, you end up with a 9 in effective skill if you're trying this maneuver, because it's not safe. It's not professional fighter don't do that kind of stuff. They will carefully advance towards an opponent, study him, and they will not make mistake. But sometimes our character in games are wilder and such. So yeah, -4 or effective skill max 9. So let's say our 2 characters are like 5 yards away. and Chepe the Rascal will do this move. So he will move is 5 yards and try to attack Sir Manfred. So I'm gonna roll dice here. Chepe the Rascal have a skill in broadsword of 12, so I have to roll 12 or less. Of course, trying this maneuver of move and attack, my effective skill is not 12, it's rather an 8. And of course, I failed my skill roll. I rolled a 13. So Chepe did move his 5 yard, tried to swing at Manfred, and probably stumbled, or maybe his broadsword just bounced off the shield of Sir Manfred, since Sir Manfred just saw it coming from 5 yards away, and it was a risky maneuver. So yeah, so Chepe missed, so the turn goes to Sir Manfred, and we don't have to do step 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and whatever, since Chepe just missed. So Sir Manfred now is next to Chepe. He will try to just maybe do a step and attack. So that's the more careful and more default attack in Gurps. You just move a little bit and you attack. That's why on the GM side, often you will not start the combat with combatants very far away, especially if everybody is doing melee attack. So sometimes you will just describe them coming and for several rounds. Instead of just playing several rounds of just people moving around, you will start the fight at the moment with most interesting. So, but if you have guys who can shoot or shoot arrows and bow and shoot arrows and not shoot bow, well, you could throw away your bow, but you know what I mean. So so yeah, in this case, Sir Manfred will just do a sidestep slightly on the right and will swing his sword at Chepe. He does this with his full skill. You have no modification. So I just rolled a 4. That's a critical success in Gurps. For the sake of this combat, I will not use the critical strike as is, because the combat could end there, and that won't be fun for educational purposes. But let's say I'll use this critical strike later to explain maybe what's going on. So let's say Manfred just rolled a successful attack. So step 3, Chepe would have, in a case of critical attack, normally the defender don't get his defense. It's an automatic hit. In this case, Chepe would have the choice of a defense. He can do 1 defense against Sir Manfred. He can dodge, and you can always dodge if you are aware of your surrounding, or if somebody is attacking you. For example, if somebody is attacking you from behind, you cannot dodge. You cannot, if you don't know you're being attacked, you cannot defend yourself. It's logic. If you have a ready weapon, you can parry. You can try to parry with your parry score. I just realized here that I forgot to calculate the parry. Just give me a moment. So the parry of a weapon is the level of skill divided by 2, and we add the 3 to that. So that's a 9. a sword, and it's the same for Manfred. So all of that is explained in the book. So yeah, when you get a parry, you take your level in skill, you divide it by 2. This, and you add +3. Most defense are calculated this way. Parry, block. If you do a power parry or power block using superpower, it's calculated like this. If you're driving a vehicle and you want to know the dodge of the vehicle, it goes the same way. To calculate the dodge, it's slightly different. You take your basic speed, and you add 3. So alright, so Chepe could do a dodge, as you can see here. And if my sword were ready, I could use it to parry. Now, when you swing a broadsword, normally the sword becomes unready after you swung it. Oftentimes I will run games that are more swashbucklery, and I will require the sword to be drawn to be ready. And if the sword is really huge, I will require it to be ready fully. But in this case, I will allow my character here to have the sword ready in his hand, just because maybe the sword is lighter than in the real life, or just because of style. So I could allow, and I will allow Chepe to roll against 9. So I just rolled a 13, so it's a miss. So Sir Manfred succeed his attack. Step 4, damage. Most weapons will have a damage code associated with them. In the case of melee weapon, you will have 2 codes of damage. You can, with a sword, you can traditionally do a stab or a swinging with it, and the amount of force that is impacted by the weapon is different depending if you are thrusting or if you are swinging. So oftentimes swords will do different damage and different type of damage. If you're stabbing someone, you're doing impaling damage. That's one damage type. And if you're swinging with it, it's like a knife. It's like a cutting blade. So the damage will be of the cutting type. And the damage code will be different just because you're doing different maneuvers with it. And these codes are calculated with the basic damage stats you have, which is determined by your strength. So I already calculated or guesstimate every code. So since I described Manfred swinging at Chepe, that will be the cutting version of it. So this is a 1 die plus 2. So that's a 3 plus 2, 5. So that's 5 points of damage. Now, as you can see, you have different types of damage: crushing, cutting, impaling, and in the Gurps book you have also other types of damage, like burning, like large piercing, small piercing. You have all kinds of types of damage, but in the end the damage will be modified or not. And In this case, since I'm cutting my my opponent with a 5 points of cutting damage, if my opponent don't have armor, the amount of damage will be increased by 50%. And if the character have no defense, no armor against damage, this is straight up just a check. You just have to check if the target have an armor. Now, if you're playing the advanced combat system of Gurps, every location on the body will have maybe armors or even layers of armor. So you can really go, very nuts with details, and if you're really into simulation, or you can have, like here, like my two characters have general body armor describing the typical armor on their body, leather in this case. So step 5 is just the check. Do I have armor? And Chepe, the martial artist, have 2 DR or damage resistance, which is his armor amongst his possession. So my 5 points of damage is reduced by 2. So normally I would reduce the hit points of Chepe by 3 and be done with it. But since it's a cutting damage, I'm giving him a little boost. So let's see. 3 points of damage multiplied by 1.5 is 4.5. And usually in Gurps you round up unless it's to your player's advantage. So the rounding convention in Gurps, you round up for point cost, but for feats of combat, for physical feats, you round down. So 4.5 is reduced to 4. So Chepe lose 4 points of damage. There's one little things to do now. It's the damage consequences. Now, when you receive damage, think of the last time you suffered physical damage, like being, I don't know, we all suffered some injuries at some point. Like myself, at one point I was skating on an ice ring, and I missed my my opportunity to break. You know, when you go sideways suddenly with your ice skates to break, and I missed my break, and my knees went into the ring border, like real hard, like bam, and I felt suddenly like my breath taken away, and I just fell on the ice, and I was in shock for a moment there. So in Gurps you have what they call shock penalty. When somebody is receiving damage, they have penalty on their next action. So Chepe just received 4 points of damage, and this 4 points of damage becomes a negative on all his skill -4 shock penalty. Becomes a -4 shock penalty to all his skill maneuvers, and that exclude defenses. Defenses are not affected by this penalty, but every attack roll is. So picture in your mind poor Chepe, who received a sword slash, and now he's in pain momentarily, but he's in pain. If he had received 1 point of damage, that would have been -1, and so on and so on, -2, -3. The maximum, ironically, the maximum shock penalty you can have is -4. In Gurps 3rd edition, there was no shock penalty maximum. So if you received like 20 points of damage, you had minus 20 to your skill next round. That was insane, and that was not very cinematic and cool, so they got rid of that. So now it's a maximum of minus 4. So poor Chepe now is he received a good blow, but he's still in a fighting form. So he still have his HP in the positive. He doesn't have his HP in negative. He didn't receive any major wound. Major wound are like when you receive a damage so extreme to your to your body. Anything like half your HP. So HP divided by 2. So poor Chepe was 1 point away from receiving a major wound. And in the case of a major wound, we would have to check for knockdown and knockout. So this is not the case. In the case of a major wound, Chepe would have to roll his HT, his health, to just stay on his feet and not be unconscious or slightly stunned. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So we simply return to the sequence of action, and the sequence of action tell us that Chepe would be next. So Chepe is now in pain, but he will try to hurt Mr. Manfred, still with his shield, and this time Chepe will try to thrust. Will try to impale his sword into the knot. So I roll an 11. So because our Chepe is currently in pain, he would have needed a minus an 8 or less, and that's a miss. So we return back to Sir Manfred, and we will use the critical roll die I luckily rolled a few moments back. So Sir Manfred will swing his sword at Chepe and roll his critical success. So Chepe don't have access to his defense. You are denied of defense when you're attacking. The attacker is rolled a critical success. So in the case of a critical success, you check on the critical hit table. You can find it in Gurps Basic Set 2, page 556. I'm rolling on this chart, and I rolled a 7, and a 7 tells me if any damage penetrates DR, or damage resistance, treat it as if it were a major wound, regardless of the actual injury. So we will talk about major wound or major injury in just a second. So we went straight from Sir Manfred, who chose this step and attack. He just didn't move into space. The defense of Chepe was denied because of the critical attack, and I'm trying to I didn't specify what type of swing sword I would do. So Chepe was trying to impale Manfred, so Manfred will just continue to swing as previously stated. Okay, so I'm gonna straight up roll for damage. Maximum damage. It's a 6 plus 2 for a total of 8 points of cutting damage. Chepe have a DR of 2. That brings that total to 6. And since it's a swinging attack, we multiplied that by 1.5, or we add 50% to that. That brings the total to 9 points of damage. So now Chepe drops from 6 to -3. And the critical table tell me that it is a major wound, even if I did just 1 point of damage, it would have been like a dislocated shoulder, a torn muscle, or an artery severed, or something like that. Very a major bad wound. And concerning the shock penalty, of course, Chepe would have again on his next turn -4 because of the 9 points of damage he received. And now several things are going on. It's like a plane going on troubles, and now every red light is lighten up and flare and so now first things first, major wound. We need to check if Chepe is still on his feet after receiving this critical blow to the body. So let me have a look. It's been a while. Knockdown and stunning. So I have to run, of course. It's not knockout, but stunning. So I will roll first to see if I fall. So I'm gonna roll health. Of course, there is some advantage that can be useful to that type of rolls. So I rolled a that's a 13, so it's a fail. So Chepe is now knocked down, or rather knocked down. And he is also stunned. So poor Chepe is in a poor condition. And as you can see, combat can goes down very fast in Gurps if you are not lucky. So all right. So something special here. When you are stunned momentarily, you also have -4 to your active defense. And this is normally not the case when you just receive a wound or a blow. You have shock penalty because of the pain, but your defense are not affected by that. But when you are stunned or knocked down after failing this major wound blow, yeah, even your defense are affected by that. Now, when your hit points hit a certain threshold, like 0, something is happening. You can find a description, a savory description of this in the Injuries, Illness, and Fatigue chapter in Gurps Basic Set 2. It's chapter 14, page 419, and it's a general injury and lost in hit points. At the moment your hit points start to hit that 0, now every time you want to do something, you have to roll HT first. And if you fail this HT roll, your character falls to the ground unconscious, or your character is not able to do his action because his consciousness is slipping away. In this case, our character is already knocked down and stunned. So next round, if in fact it's an it's an immediate threat. So on his next turn, Chepe will roll his HT to see if he's conscious or not. Now the combat would after after Sir Manfred's blow, that would be in fact Chepe's turn. So when I was mentioning Chepe's next turn, I was talking about like right now. As a GM, I'm used to have several characters, so I was mixed a little bit for a moment there, but it's fun. So Chepe now is on the ground, still have his sword in his hand, probably. He's in pain, he's confused, he's stunned. Normally Chepe would be able to function. The fact that he received damage is not the reason why he will not be able to do any action this time. Because if he received a normal blow and his HP just happened to go down to 0, he would still be able to make this attempt at attacking Sir Manfred's back. But he received a major wound, and now he's down, he's stunned. So just because of this stun, this forces our character here to do this maneuver, doing nothing. Does that make sense to you? So this turn, our character is on the ground and he can do nothing basically. He's a sitting duck for this round, and this could be his last moment on this earth or any planet he might be. So let's go back to Sir Manfred. Sir Manfred will try to, of course, take advantage of this situation, and maybe he would normally take down the rascal and end his mustache-twirling career. But maybe Sir Manfred is a knight. Maybe he wants to offer his opponent a chance to surrender. So if I'm going back to the previous description of the combat, being on a beach, maybe it was a duel. Maybe the story wanted this combat to be a duel on the beach. Maybe some affair needed to be settled between these two gentlemen. So Sir Manfred could, in this situation, maybe ask to... yeah, he would totally do that. So he would offer his victim, opponent, a chance to surrender. But Sir Manfred, being an experienced fighter, he will choose a maneuver called Wait. The maneuver Wait is similar to the maneuver called Delay, I think, in D&D or Pathfinder. Well, Sir Manfred's player would here declare what condition could make him do an attack, maybe. So he will wait for the answer, and if Chepe the rascal is trying to double cross him, he will just strike down his sword and try to do a thrust, maybe to his throat or his chest. So Sir Manfred will wait. That will be his tactical maneuver in the game. Is in game term, this will be his maneuver. But roleplay wise, Sir Manfred's character could do the impassionate appeal to ask for Chepe's surrendering. So I would, as a GM, I would let totally that happen. Roleplay is primordial in this hobby, so I would let that happen and mentally take note that maybe ask Sir Manfred's players if you want to wait and maybe prepare something. And upon hearing this, I would just take note that if Chepes just try to do something threatening, Sir Manfred could strike just before Chepe, just because he prepared for it. He's waiting, basically. He's in waiting mode. So his action is pending, you know. So Chepe, let's go back to Chepe. Maybe he could answer back to this question. We will roll his health now, just to see if he's yeah. When you are stunned at the end of each turn, you roll HT to just snap out of it, so you can act normally. So that's an 11. So it's not successful. So for another round, Chepe would be stunned on the ground. And you can see now the importance of the HT stats in this game, and also the importance of the HP stat. If Chepe had like 15 or 18 HP, he would still be up and would not be in the negative HP. So let's do another round. A round later, Chepe finally succeeds his HT roll, so he's no more stunned, so his defense are getting back to normal. And Chepe, being the rascal, being an extremely niche martial artist and a mustache twirler, he's probably a villain. So he would probably try to use his position on the ground and maybe try to stab Sir Manfred's foot. So yeah, it would totally do that. So let's end this fight with some moves. So normally it would be Chepe's action, but I have to do something first. You will try now to act actively against Sir Manfred, and he is in the negative 8 points zone. So before he can do that, you have to roll his HT or fall unconscious on the ground. This is the way it is. When your HP is in the negative and you try to do something, you have to roll every turn. It's brutal, this game. when you're not very suited for combat, or when you don't have a good armor or a good HP, you can go down in one turn or two, and this is the nature of this game. If you want to make it more cinematic, just bump up the health, the HP, give every major character like +5 HP, give people some measure of armor, and you should be fine for a long combat. But our two fighters here are quite fragile by Gurps standard. So Chepe is trying to do his stuff. So I'm rolling his HT. His HT is good. I rolled a 10. So he's okay. He just made it barely, but he's okay. So he tried to do his move, but Sir Manfred, since Sir Manfred was waiting for a treachery, he will have his action before Chepe. So so Sir Manfred just tried to poke Chepe in the chest with his broadsword. It's a 9 on his skill of 12, so that's a success by 3. So it's a success. Chepe will try to dodge. I'm going a little faster here. I took time to explain every step, but now we're going a little bit faster. So Chepe is not successful at dodging, so he received 1 dice of impaling. the chest. That's a 4. 4 minus 2. So that's a 2 points of damage. And since it's a impaling, we multiply this by 2. So Chepe is now at minus 7. Okay, Chepe is trying to stab the foot of Sir Manfred. He will try to roll his HD. And that's a 15. So Chepe, after being stabbed into the chest, he reached for Sir Manfred's foot, trying to hurt him, and his eyes turn and his head go limp, and he just fall on the beach, unconscious, not dead, but unconscious on the beach. Death in Gurps happen when you reach minus your HP in negative. In this case, for our poor Chepe, that would be minus 10 because of the HP stat. So he's not dead. He's probably bleeding all over. He's down for the count. So now Sir Manfred could just decapitate him. He could, or give him grace. But since of his treacherous action, his honor was found to be non-existent. Sir Manfred would probably, give the coup de grace to this rascal, and the combat would be done. So this example of combat was pretty sketchy, but I hope it gave you a little peek of what is going on when you're doing GURPS combat. It may seem like a bit of calculation here and there, but as I said earlier, these are natural way of doing things. If you think about it, when you receive damage, if you have armor on you, it should have an impact. So it just comes naturally. But of course, if you are learning the game, maybe it's totally alien to you, and I would recommend to just do one step at a time. Maybe use this combat step by step as a guide, and maybe do your own combat step by step instruction. You can go to the mooc.net if you want to have the full spectrum, the full combat, and every rules used in a combat example. But even myself, as a GURPS game master, I prefer to just go with what seems appropriate at the moment and not bother too much with the rest. For some games I did in the past, I was more maybe focused on simulation, but these games required that level, and for other games like the superhero game, I was more flexible with the rules, more cinematic. So I hope that helped, and thanks for watching. And poor Chepe just lost because of pure bad luck, and Sir Manfred just owned this combat. So thanks for watching.